a quiet countryside, a resettlement area right next to the fields where people live slowly, grow vegetables, paint, and love each other peacefully. Emer O'Loughlin, 27 years old, lived there with her boyfriend in a tiny mobile home just big enough for the two of them. She was a painter, cheerful and dreamy. No financial debt, no enemies. But then, one April morning in 2005, flames burst from the caravan next door. When the fire was extinguished, a charred body was found in the debris. Police ruled it an accident. The body, they said, belonged to the neighbor, John Griffin. But there was one thing no one could explain: Emer had disappeared. It wasn't until 5 years later, when the remains were re-examined, that the truth came out. The body in the fire wasn't John Griffin, it was Emergency. The kind, gentle girl who had lived right next to him. She had been killed, burned, forgotten, under the name of her killer. This is the story of a murder that was forgotten. Of a murderer who faked his death and vanished from the world for nearly 20 years. And of the mistakes that buried justice in the ashes. 1. The case introduction: when the victim vanished Friday afternoon, April 8, 2005, an afternoon that seemed like nothing special. Until the phone in the pocket of Shane Bow's work jacket rang in the middle of his shift. Shane was then a young carpenter, around 20 years old, working in the west of Ireland. The person on the other end of the line brought chilling news. A fire was breaking out in Ballybor, the remote area where he and his girlfriend, Emer O'Loughlin, 23, were living together in a caravan. There were only 2 caravans in that area. One belonged to Shane and Emergency, the other to their neighbor, John Griffin. Shane immediately left the work site and rushed home. He arrived just before 4 p.m., but by then, the fire was no longer a fire. What remained could only be described as a pile of ashes. The other caravan had been completely destroyed by the flames. No structure, no shape left. Shane stood there, staring at a charred, misshapen metal frame. Years later, Shane still shudders when recalling it. He told author Yvonne Kinsella all that was left of the caravan at that time was a burned-out frame. Nothing else. All the aluminum was gone, it had all melted. There was absolutely nothing left, just a pile of blackened debris. We could identify some heavy items and burned cutlery, but all the glass was gone. It was no longer a place to live, it was a crematorium. At first, a flicker of relief appeared when Shane realized that his and Emer's caravan was still intact. But that feeling was quickly replaced by unease, because Emer wasn't there. All morning, he hadn't spoken to her, and now, her phone couldn't be reached. Shane walked closer to the home. The caravan door was wide open. Emer's car was still parked outside, just like always. Her car keys, wallet, and camera, the things she usually carried when going for a walk, were all still inside. Only one thing was missing: the phone. What was even more worrying was that their 2 pet dogs were running freely outside. This was extremely unusual, because Emer was known as a responsible owner. She would always take the dogs with her or lock them carefully inside the house. That day, Emer was supposed to be at school, but the university was closed to commemorate Pope John Paul II. Early that morning, the couple had woken up and discovered that the electricity in the caravan had gone out again, a persistent problem they had spent hundreds of euros trying to fix in the previous weeks. Emer's phone had also run out of battery since the night before. Before going to work, Shane suggested she go ask the neighbor, the owner of the only other caravan in the area, to borrow some electricity. Now that caravan had burned down to its frame, and its owner was nowhere to be found. A wave of worry for Emer's safety surged inside Shane. Shane called the police in the town of Gort. An officer was quickly sent to the scene. When the officer arrived, Shane was in a panic. He pointed at something that looked very much like human remains lying among the rubble. A doctor was immediately brought in and confirmed that it was indeed a human body. However, it had been badly damaged by the fire, so for the time being, he could not give any further information, nor make any identification. The area was immediately cordoned off. Meanwhile, Shane called Johnny O'Loughlin, Emer's father. Johnny was working about 20 miles south, just outside the town of Ennis. After the call, Johnny got into his truck and hurried toward Ballybor. When he arrived, he met his 2 sons, Emer's brothers, Raymond and John. The 3 of them spread out to search the area, hoping that Emer was just out for a walk somewhere near the house. In a television documentary produced many years later, Raymond said, "We only needed to look around to know something was wrong. Everything was too unusual." As daylight slowly faded, darkness began to fall. There was no sign of the missing student or the owner of the destroyed caravan. Emer's relatives at the scene believed that the human remains found after the fire most likely belonged to her. Johnny said, "We found nothing, so we had to assume it was emergency." Her brother John personally gave the news to their mother. Then he continued driving more than 230 kilometers to Dublin and flew to Heathrow Airport in England to inform their sister Pamela, who had been living in the UK for many years. Years later, Pamela recalled, "All the signs pointed to the victim in the fire being emergency. From the very beginning, I had a feeling that it was my sister." Emer O'Loughlin was born on February 24, 1978, the youngest of 4 children of Johnny and Josephine. Her family lived in the town of Ennis, a quiet and ancient place by the River Fergus in County Clare, facing the west coast of Ireland. Since childhood, Emer had been described as a cheerful, lively child, always full of energy, and she especially loved animals, particularly dogs and horses. When Emer was 9, her parents separated. Her mother, Josephine, moved to Dublin, while Emer chose to stay in Ennis with her father, Johnny. From that point on, the relationship between the two became extremely close. Johnny once said about his daughter, "Wherever I went, she followed. She was like my shadow." From a young age, Emer showed a clear artistic talent. She always carried paper and pen to draw, sketch, or a camera to capture whatever she found beautiful. During her teenage years, Emer studied at Animo Vocational School, where she continued to develop her creativity. But after finishing her studies there, Emer still hadn't figured out a clear direction for her future. She started trying many different jobs to find the path that suited her. It was during that period that Emer and Shane began a romantic relationship. Shane recalled, "I first met Emer when I was about 12 or 13 years old during summer holidays in Ennis. I went there every summer, and I had known her for many years. When I was about 17, we became best friends, and our feelings just naturally grew. Everything between us happened very naturally. In the 5 years we were together, I think we were apart for only 10 or 15 days total. We were very close. After some time together, the couple decided to travel. They spent 2 years in the Netherlands, then explored Thailand together. When they returned to Ireland and were ready to settle down, the couple decided to live in a mobile home in the rural area of Ballybah to save money, with the plan of building their own house later. Johnny, Emer's father, once emotionally recalled, "I still remember the first day she got that mobile home. I drove her to the land in the Jeep, and it was the happiest day of her life." The beautiful natural surroundings rekindled Emer's artistic flame. She often walked around the area, sketching and taking photos of what she saw. In September 2004, Emer enrolled in an art course at the Galway Mayo Institute of Technology. It was the first step in a bigger plan to become a student at the National College of Art and Design in Dublin. By 2005, Emer's efforts had paid off. She was accepted into her dream program, which was set to begin in September. Shane said, "We had started talking about building a house, and everything was going well. But Emer's education was always the top priority. If she had to move to Dublin to study, we would find a way to make it work." And yet, Emer's dream came to an end far too soon. 2. Summary of the initial investigation. After the horrifying scene in Ballybah, investigators immediately got to work. Their top priority was to determine the whereabouts of the owner of the burned-out caravan. That was John Griffin, 36 years old, from Moycullen, a town over 20 miles north of Ballybah. Not only to ensure that the remains weren't his, but also to find out whether he knew anything about Emer's whereabouts. Griffin was no stranger to the authorities. His record was full of previous convictions for assault, violence against women, and a reputation for aggressive behavior in the local community. According to a 2005 article in the Irish Independent, Emer knew Griffin, and more than that, she seemed to be afraid of him. Several other newspapers also reported that Griffin was a well-known drug dealer in the city of Galway, where he was last seen on the night of the fire. He told police that he hadn't been in Ballybah since the previous day, that he had stayed overnight in the city with a relative, and that he couldn't provide any further information. A vague statement, but not enough grounds for the police to detain him. The next day, The remains found in the caravan were transferred to Galway University Hospital. The deputy state pathologist, Dr. Michael Curtis, performed the autopsy. But due to the horrific level of damage caused by the fire, Dr. Curtis could only confirm that the remains belonged to a young woman, and he was completely unable to determine the cause of death. To identify the remains, a DNA sample was taken from Emer's father, Johnny, for analysis. It was a race against time, and a gamble filled with uncertainty. Meanwhile, officers began interviewing the few available witnesses in the sparsely populated rural area. They speculated that the fire might have broken out around midday, but went unnoticed for a long period. As the initial phase of the investigation unfolded, a series of strange, possibly even bizarre, events connected to John Griffin began to surface. 3 days after the fire, Griffin suddenly set off for Connemara, and from there took a ferry to Inishmore, the largest of the Aran Islands, home to the ancient ruins of Duine-Anghasa, a 3,000-year-old fortress perched atop a 300-foot cliff. When he arrived, Griffin did something unbelievable. He barricaded himself inside the fortress and began throwing stones at passers-by while shouting wildly. Authorities were alerted and quickly arrived at the scene. They found Griffin in an extremely agitated state. He even threatened to jump off the massive cliff. Unable to persuade him with words, riot police had to be deployed from the mainland. The Aran Islands lifeboat was also called in case Griffin actually carried out his crazy threat. After a standoff that lasted several hours, Griffin finally agreed to leave with the authorities and was taken to St. Brigid's Hospital in Ballinasloe. The following day, the DNA results finally confirmed what Emer's family had feared. The remains found in the fire did indeed belong to Emer O'Loughlin. In the following days, reports indicated that the authorities were treating the death as suspicious and issued an urgent appeal to taxi drivers who may have picked up or dropped off passengers in the Ballybough area on the morning of the fire. They were also searching for a man who had been seen driving a red or orange vehicle in the area around that time. The O'Loughlin family expressed deep disappointment over the lack of progress in the investigation. They believe the officers should have focused all their efforts on John Griffin, given his criminal history and notorious reputation. Instead, in the early days of the investigation, the focus was heavily placed on Emer's boyfriend, Shane Bow, even though he had a solid alibi, having been at work on a construction site with many co-workers able to testify up until the moment he received the call about the fire. This made Emer's father, Johnny, extremely angry. He later recalled, "Every time I saw Shane, he was in the back of a police car. And Griffin? No one seemed to care about him." What's more striking is this. Despite Griffin's strange behavior on Inishmore Island and the fact that he was the last known person to be with Emer before her death, not a single newspaper mentioned his name, and no photographs of him were ever published. All the public ever knew about him was a 36-year-old man, owner of the mobile home where Emer died. A vague, generic description, as if deliberately hiding his identity. After 5 days at St. Brigid's Hospital, Griffin carried out yet another puzzling act. He suddenly shaved off his beard and his dreadlocked hair, drastically changing his appearance, and then left the hospital on his own. Strangely, the police were not waiting outside the clinic to monitor him. In fact, he shouldn't have had any opportunity to leave. Once again, Griffin took a ferry to Inishmore, this time using a fake name. However, he was identified by witnesses thanks to one distinctive detail, a unique neck tattoo, as reported in newspapers at the time. Later that day, authorities receive a report that the Duine-Anghasa site had once again been fenced off. But when officers arrived, they were surprised to find that Griffin was not at the location. Instead, they found a neatly folded pile of men's clothing at the edge of the cliff. The clothes were confirmed to be his. Authorities began to question whether Griffin had, in fact, carried out the threat he had made the week before and jumped off the cliff. A comprehensive search of the area was carried out, on land and at sea, using helicopters, lifeboats, and divers, but John Griffin could not be found anywhere. There was also no sign that he had returned to the mainland. No one, not even friends or family, reported him missing. No one came to claim his clothes either. A perfect disappearance. Investigators did not believe that John Griffin was truly dead. In the following weeks, they issued a warrant for Griffin to be questioned regarding Emer's death, a case that still had not been officially classified as a murder. Speculation began to emerge. that Griffin might have escaped the island on a small private boat, possibly with help from an accomplice, and that he'd faked his death to evade the authorities. The media quickly compared the case to that of Colin Whelan, a computer analyst who faked his own death and fled to Spain after murdering his wife, Mary Goff. Whelan had been discovered by an Irish tourist while working in a bar, then extradited and pleaded guilty to murder in 2005. Whelan's case once shocked Dublin, leading some to believe that John Griffin may have drawn inspiration from his disappearance. Strangely, even though he was a wanted suspect and had vanished under mysterious circumstances, John Griffin's name and photo were never released for public identification. If this wasn't a cover-up, then it was a deadly act of negligence. By refusing to release the suspect's identity, the police had, whether unintentionally or deliberately, shut down the entire social network of public assistance. For Emer's family, this development only deepened their growing frustration. And you know what's even more terrifying? Not that Griffin disappeared, but that he never truly had to run. Because from the very beginning, no one ever chased him. 2 weeks after Emer's death, her remains were finally returned to the O'Loughlin family. It had been an agonizingly long period of waiting, filled with unbearable grief. A wake was held at her father Johnny's the following day. The funeral was held at the Church of Our Lady and St. Michael in Ennis, with hundreds of people attending to bid farewell to the young, talented artist. Johnny called it a big funeral. I try to hold back my tears. I just wish I could have recorded the ceremony so I could see it every day. A few weeks later, in May, a faint glimmer of hope appeared when the police arrested 3 people, 2 women and 1 man, on suspicion of withholding important information related to the case. But then, like a slap in the face to Emer's family, police confirmed to the media that they were not considered suspects. The investigation once again fell into a deadlock. Still, another case file was sent to the Director of Public Prosecutions concerning John Griffin. The response from the prosecutor was that the crime scene had been seriously compromised, resulting in the loss of valuable evidence. Griffin was believed to have fled to the United Kingdom and then disappeared. Silence dragged on. The media gradually withdrew, but Emer's family did not. They continued to fight. In 2006, Emer's boyfriend Shane Bow erected a large wooden cross right at the site of the fire to remember her. It remains there to this day, a painful reminder of the loss. A year later, Animo Vocational School established the Emer O'Loughlin Award for Outstanding Students. Small efforts to keep her name from being forgotten. In 2008, when investigations seemed to be at a standstill, Emer's sister, Pam, decided to take matters into her own hands. With help from her brother Raymond, she created a Facebook page titled Justice for Emer O'Loughlin. In a post filled with desperation yet determination, Pam wrote, "Emer's killer is still at large. He is being hidden and helped by someone, possibly family or friends. My brother and I have decided to do everything we can, even if it's only through the internet, to do what the police, Interpol, and the media haven't done: trace his whereabouts." This page has hundreds of friends, and each of them knows hundreds more. Maybe someone will recognize him. We know the chances are slim, but it's the only chance we have. Please remember, this is a call for information, not a call to action. A brave voice confronting the silence and helplessness of the system. Emer's family never stopped fighting to keep her case from being forgotten. In 2009, 3 family members, Pam, Josephine, and Raymond, took part in an in-depth interview for the book Living with Murder: Families Left Behind by author Yvonne Kinsella. Notably, this was also one of the rare, and perhaps only, times Emer's boyfriend, Shane Bow, spoke publicly about the case. In those pages, he shared the pain of loss, the feeling of helplessness, and the emotional weight he had carried for many years since that fateful day. Finally, in 2010, a faint glimmer of light appeared in the darkness. The Serious Crime Review team decided to re-examine Emer's case. By that time, Emer's family had become deeply disheartened by the silence and delays from the authorities. John Griffin still had not been publicly named, and the family strongly opposed the investigators' insistence on calling Emer's death a suspicious death. To them, it had always been murder. In a meeting with the new investigation team, Pam O'Loughlin was told that because the initial post-mortem had been inconclusive, they could not be 100% certain about how Emer had died. Pam's response was truly haunting. "Then dig her up." She made it clear, Dig her up. Find the truth. A painful decision, but a necessary one in the search for buried truth. The review made several recommendations, including the exhumation of Emer's remains for a second post-mortem examination. A deeply distressing option, but the family agreed. They understood that if there was even the slightest hope of learning the truth, then the pain was something they would have to bear. The review team sought the assistance of forensic anthropologist Dr. Lorraine Buckley, an expert in severely decomposed bodies and skeletal remains. She recommended using X-ray technology to more thoroughly examine any injuries. Based on her advice, a request was submitted to the Clare County coroner to issue an exhumation order, which was subsequently granted. At 7 a.m. on Wednesday, May 19, 2010, the exhumation was carried out under the supervision of her father, Johnny, and her brother, Raymond. Speaking to the media, Superintendent Sean Healy of the Gort Station, who was assigned to oversee the operation, said, "Since 2005, forensic science has advanced significantly, and we hope to apply those advancements to this case. Making the decision to exhume was not easy and required the family's consent. We fully understand that this is an extremely painful process, as it forces the loved ones to confront their loss again. Ngarda Sayakana deeply respects that and will handle everything with the utmost care and respect." Regarding John Griffin, though his name had never been publicly released, Emer's father, Johnny O'Loughlin, told the media that the main suspect was still at large. "It's only a matter of time before the police find him," he said. "I believe that because every officer I've spoken to believes it too. They have a lot of evidence, but they can't disclose it for fear of compromising the case." It was an almost desperate hope, clinging to the fragile belief that justice would come, even if late. Emer's remains were transferred to University Hospital Galway. Deputy State Pathologist Dr. Michael Curtis, along with Dr. Buckley, carried out the examination. The X-ray results revealed a horrifying and unexpected truth, evidence of stab wounds around the cervical spine. Emer's remains were transferred to University Hospital Galway. Deputy State Pathologist Dr. Michael Curtis, along with Dr. Buckley, conducted the examination. The X-ray results revealed a horrifying and unexpected truth, evidence of knife wounds around the cervical vertebrae. One notable detail resurfaced. While sifting through the remains of John Griffin's burned-out caravan in 2005, investigators had found a kukri knife, a traditional Nepalese curved blade about a foot long. Could this match be the answer to Emer's death, or was it just a chilling coincidence? With this new evidence, the police finally confirmed Emer had been murdered. The investigation was officially upgraded to a homicide, recognizing what the O'Loughlin family had believed from the very beginning. Pam told the Irish Examiner, "We always knew Emer was murdered. Never doubted it, not for a second." In a heart-wrenching plea, Johnny cried out, "Was she in pain? Was she tortured or beaten or anything like that? Did she suffer? We just hope she didn't have to endure all those terrible things." He urged the public, someone out there knows where he is, maybe even hiding him. Please come forward and give the information to the Gardaí. 2 days after the examination, Emer's remains were reburied at Animo Cemetery in a small, peaceful ceremony attended by her closest loved ones. This time, she would finally rest in peace. But the biggest question still lingers. Was John Griffin truly the one who took Emer's life? And if so, will justice ever be served while he continues to hide in the shadows? 2 months after the painful exhumation and the second autopsy, a major turning point occurred, a glimmer of light in the midst of darkness. At last, the name John Griffin, the man who had hidden in the shadows for years, was officially announced as a suspect in Emer's murder. Interpol issued an international arrest warrant, marking the first major breakthrough in the O'Loughlin family's long quest for justice. A wanted poster bearing Griffin's image was distributed to law enforcement agencies across Europe. It included detailed physical descriptions and noted that he had used multiple aliases such as Fuzzy, John B. Griffin, and John McDermott. He was also known to frequently give false birth dates, most commonly December 18, 1972, whereas his actual birth date is June 8, 1967. In 2005, Griffin was known to have left London for Germany. Police now believe he could still be in Germany, may have returned to the UK, or could be hiding out in Spain or the Netherlands. A dangerous man with multiple identities, like a ghost slipping through the heart of Europe. Unfortunately, the call to track down John Griffin has yet to produce any significant results. However, at the very least, his identity has now been made public. Another year passed, and the investigation continued in vain. Then, in November 2011, a new step was taken. The organization Crime Stoppers offered a reward for anyone who could provide information about Griffin's whereabouts. Wanted posters bearing his photo were widely distributed in County Galway and Clare. Lead investigator Pat Murray stated that he believed someone knew where John Griffin was. "We believe he's living somewhere in Europe under a false identity. He has previously used the name John McDermott. We also believe he has friends or acquaintances who know his whereabouts." One detail that once caused confusion in the media was the tattoo on Griffin's neck, originally reported as a Celtic design, but in fact an Egyptian symbol, the Eye of Horus. This inaccuracy made Emer's family, especially Pam, extremely angry, fearing it could prevent people from recognizing him in real life. Could this carelessness have contributed to the prolonging of the case? At the end of 2011, the case was featured on the TV program Ireland's Crime Call. However, no footage can be found online, and there appear to be no updates until 2013, when the murder was once again featured in the TV documentary series Cracking Crime. Pam, Josephine, Johnny, Raymond, and John all appeared in the episode, recalling cherished memories of their beloved emergency. A number of investigators also appeared in the program, including Detective Chief Christy Mangan of the Serious Crime Review team, who stated that there had been several sightings of a man believed to be John Griffin in different European countries, including Germany, though none of the leads were ever confirmed. After another year of silence regarding Emer's murder, in April 2014, the Irish Daily Mail published an article reporting that John Griffin was living in Scotland, with possible traces of his presence in the capital city of Edinburgh. However, a follow-up article in February 2015 sadly confirmed that the police still had no leads on his whereabouts. Just 2 weeks before that article was published, Emer's mother, Josephine, had tragically passed away after a long illness. As the 10th anniversary of Emer's murder approached, the lack of new evidence led to declining media attention, leaving the O'Loughlin family in a painful limbo, waiting patiently for John Griffin to make a mistake and reveal his location, hoping for any breakthrough in the investigation. Shane Bow, Emer's boyfriend, also sadly passed away in April 2018. A year later, Johnny O'Loughlin received information from an Irish man living in Morocco who claimed to have seen Griffin. Johnny strongly believed the information was credible. He said the police had sent the man a photo of John Griffin, hoping he would post it around the area to gather more leads. But the man refused, fearing that doing so would alert Griffin and cause him to flee. Although the police had been in contact with this man, Johnny felt they did not fully pursue the opportunity, another missed chance. In January 2022, the Irish Independent revealed that police had finally found evidence confirming that John Griffin had lived in Scotland a few years earlier. Through collaboration between Irish police, Interpol, and Scottish police, they traced him to a rehabilitation center. Unfortunately, Griffin had left the facility before police realized he had been a patient there. January 2022 also marked a series of new public appeals for information, just before the third documentary about the case aired, part of the Maru series by TG4. The episode was broadcast on May 25th, and as of the time this video was made, it remains available on TG4's website. Aside from interviews with Johnny and Pam, the entire episode was produced in the Irish language. The final scene of the film is particularly moving. Johnny gently wipes down his beloved boat, which he named Lady Emer, in memory of his daughter. He shared, "A lot of people ask me, who is Lady Emer? If I pass away, my sons will keep this boat. Lady Emer will always be there. Once you name a boat, you never erase it." Pam proudly shows off a small tattoo on her wrist, a simple yet meaningful dragonfly. She says, "Emer used to have a very vibrant and beautiful dragonfly tattoo. I got this one to remember my sister." Such small gestures carry a world of love and a pain that has no name. Not only did Pam manage the Justice for Emer O'Loughlin Facebook page and stay in contact with the media, she also personally followed numerous leads. She searched across the world investigating tattoo parlors to see if anyone had ever tattooed or removed a depiction of the Eye of Horus on the throat of an Irish man. But all her efforts led nowhere. The lack of answers slowly drained Pam, as she once shared with the Sun. I'm exhausted. For 16 years, I've lived just to keep her memory alive. I go online every single day. Last year, I decided it's time to let her go. I need to live my own life. I feel the hope is slipping away. We're getting older, and my biggest fear is that she'll be forgotten, and I can't let that happen. She tearfully imagines what Emer would be like if she were still alive. Maybe now she would be a wonderful mother, a girl with tattoos and piercings, calm, free-spirited, artistic, living true to herself. In March 2024, the Emer O'Loughlin case was revisited on RT's Crime Call. In that episode, Johnny and Pam spent time talking about Emer and looking back at her sketchbooks. While no new leads were revealed, the program did highlight one very striking detail. This is the image of suspect John Griffin that you've seen many times in the video. And this is the image used in the recent episode of Crime Call. Do you notice anything different? In the new photo, the New York Yankees baseball team logo on Griffin's beanie has been removed. Even more surprising, on his neck, there appears to be a tattoo of the Eye of Horus.